and welcome to another live edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And I want to say, what's interesting about podcasts, and if anybody's podcast curious or you've ever wanted to start a podcast, we've actually started a podcast academy, my friend Julie and I. So if you want to learn how to start a podcast, how to grow it, how to monetize it, all of that stuff, we welcome you. Hey, Tally. I see Tally is here. Great morning to you. Yeah, if you've ever been interested in starting a podcast, we've started this amazing group on the school platform called the Dragonfly uh, Flight Academy or Podcast Academy. So come check that out. But part of podcasting is checking metrics and downloads and all of that stuff. And I'm just curious for those of you that tune in on the regular, um, whether or not you prefer the episodes that we put out, because we put out 2 episodes a week on Tuesdays and Fridays. So tomorrow will be the guest episode, and it's one of my favorites. It's Todd Herman, and we talk about the alter ego, which obviously is very popular for me with the whole dragon thing. But then we do our solo episodes. So this episode here that we're about to do, and we hope that you guys will engage in it and therefore be in the episode. But we hope that you guys will interact so that you can be in it. But that podcast will get cleaned up, shortened, and be the Friday drop. And what I'm noticing with the downloads is that it's pretty resounding that the amount of people listening to, I would assume that's because they prefer it. But what do you prefer? I don't know if you guys follow the podcast. Every week we have like amazing guests that are on all the top podcasts, and they come on here and we make sense of topics. But just out of curiosity, if you guys want to share, what's the format that you like? We try to keep our podcast episodes at about 30 minutes, but then our guest episodes are a little bit longer format, usually about 45 minutes to an hour. So just curious if you have any sort of inclination to share, what is the format that you guys prefer? Do you guys like the solo episodes, or do you like hearing from guests? I would love to be able to build my podcast, my show, based on your demands, your needs. I want to supply the demand. So love and appreciate all you for being here. Thanks so much. Once again, Substack and YouTube. And we're going to get started here. So I want to start my show by letting you guys know a little bit more about who I am. I realize that sometimes I might come across as somebody that, you know, is like some sort of neuroscientist or, somebody that like should have the background to validate a lot of the stuff that I talk about. So I thought that this would be an important, opportunity for me to just tell you a little bit more about me and I guess what validates me doing this show and my book and all of that stuff. So I guess my credentials are that I'm a doctor of chiropractic with a background in nutrition and over 20 years, because we're going to talk about health today. And there's a very specific reason that's going to be on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. But for the past 20 years, I've also been a health transformation coach. I've got my own health transformation, but I've worked very, very deeply with hundreds of thousands of people in the realm of health transformation. So most importantly, I've navigated, and this is what I really want people to know, and you guys all have your own story, but most importantly, I've navigated some of the most challenging and darkest of times in life and experienced the miracle of spontaneously shifting from dark into the light, and making sense of things, So that's something that prompts me to kind of spend the last couple of decades of my life entrenched in reading and research, and specifically around human behavior and mindset performance and the human response system. This is why I created the interface response system, because I was looking for a sequence that everybody else could use to make sense of things, to reframe what you might perceive as having a bad time, and you might perceive that you're stuck in life. I don't think that anybody's actually stuck in life. I just think that they're a little bit scattered and maybe have lost control over their perception machine. you know? So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So that's why I built the interface response system. So this show is really about anything that makes you go, "Hmm." I'm so fascinated by so many things, and as you guys know, the hat stands for haven't made up my mind, about anything, and I don't know if I ever plan to make up my mind about anything because 'cause I'm just always open and curious to growth. So the topics that I bring you, some of them come from some expertise and some credentials, but I think what I love to do is take things that I know that a lot of people are thinking about, a lot of people are curious about, and kind of translating them and helping you make sense of them using some of my systems. So the final thing is that I've created a mastermind. It's a free mastermind and it happens once a month. It'll be this Thursday on the 16th. Everybody's welcome. It happens once a month and it's based on my book where we really deep dive and we start going into learning, the interface response system and how to navigate all of that stuff. So I see Lori is saying hello, hands yellow, heart red. Okay. I don't know what that means, but hello to you, Lori. Great morning. And we're going to get started. So, kind of a disclaimer, this show, this dragon, we care a lot less about talking and more about what's working, right? We care less about being right and more about being kind, and open, and more about living responsibly in this world. Um, I'm a big, big advocate of the fact that I am responsible for my success, my happiness, my health, and all of the things that I control, and I'm not responsible for anything else, right? So we think of this less like an opportunity for me to teach you about what's right and more about us exploring what might be true. That's what I love about my work and these conversations is we just point things out that might be true, and we'll do that together. So, as I always say, welcome to the uprising of the sleepwalking masses, and welcome to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. We're happy that you're here. So today we're going to unpack how to stop cravings. This is a huge one. God, the statistics in America right now and the world, but specifically America, it's staggering how much people struggle with this. And you see this in obesity and metabolic dysfunction. Um, and the reason why this is an important conversation to have, we're going to talk about food noise and stopping the craving, because people are using medications and all kinds of things. It's a diagnosis now. We're going to talk about h- how that is something that you can do on your own even if you're getting assistance from other tools. And the reason why that's important for this show is that, as you know, one of our tenets is that it's who you are that determines how well what you do works. So if we're going to talk about stuff and arm and equip you with the weapon of awareness and arm and equip you with some tools and strategies to get better results in life, but your vessel, the who behind the do is less than adequate, we have to look at that. I think that if anybody's feeling stuck, I think the easiest way to get in action is to focus on your health. So, every now and then, I love to talk about health. I love to talk about metabolic dysfunction. You'll see I have some of the experts coming on my show, and now you know why. So, we're going to talk about how to stop cravings before they start. And that's the voice of food noise. And this affects everybody. So it's based on this. Do you ever wake up feeling, or like me, right? Wake up feeling super committed to your health, only to find yourself reaching for an unhealthy snack all of a sudden, sometime like midday, all of a sudden. So, everything is just looking like I'm going to kick ass today. Maybe it's January 1st. Maybe it's today. Maybe it's Monday. And then all of a sudden we start reaching for things and feeling like it's justified doing that. So I contend that this is not a willpower issue. So this is one of the concepts we're going to talk about. I should say I contend that this might not be a willpower issue, but it's a food noise issue, okay? And we're gonna really unpack that. So in this episode, I'm gonna reveal the hidden biological triggers that hijack your brain and how to reclaim control using the interface response system. So a lot of people think that the interface response system from my book, and if you haven't gotten my book, it's called Make Sense: How to Rewire Your Mind and Transform Your Life. We're doing the audiobook version of that, getting a lot of positive feedback. And once again, when you get this book, you're welcome to join the mastermind. Just reach out through any channel, Substack, YouTube, at Dr. JC Dornick on Instagram, whatever, to find out about uh, the mastermind, and that's going to be this Thursday. Um, but it's who you are that determines how well what you do works. And the interface response system is all about positioning you as a more conscious, aware human being so that you can have better results at the things that you're going to do. So if you're just looking to be less affected by distraction, and food noise comes into play there, or react in a healthier fashion when somebody gives you unsolicited criticism, or perhaps be less affected by the world news, not ignorant to it, but less affected. The interface response system is great for that. But if you are looking to get control over your food noise, it's a highly effective system. So I hope that you'll enjoy that. So once again, we're looking at this idea of how we can be 100% committed in the morning. Maybe you are right there right now to your diet, at 8 a.m. in the morning. But by 1 p.m., a tiny voice in our head starts to convince us that we deserve, I don't know, a donut or a slice of pizza or something like that. And you're not broken. You're just being hijacked by this thing called food noise. And today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you exactly how that noise works. So that's always the first step. We don't just say, how do I get rid of food noise? Let's first really deep dive and find out what food noise is and how it works. And on a neurological basis as well, biologically, behaviorally, and more importantly, how to stop food cravings before they start. And we're going to use a simple 4-step system so that you can finally become the shot caller and dominant force of your life. Remember, this is all about control. It's not about becoming a control freak, but it's about learning how to control the things that we control, the controllables. So stick with me, because once you see how all of this works, you're never going to look at cravings the same way again. So hang out with us until the end, and I think that you're going to have some big, big changes. So great morning, Bloomington. Great morning, Michael Huang. Great morning to you, Kathy, Ricardo David, Missy for Grand Proud LLC, Tiziana, Craig Ashton. Good to see everybody. Great morning. Feel free to share this around. Hello to everybody joining us on YouTube. So food noise, that's what this is about. The voice that negotiates you away from yourself. Think about that word negotiation when you think about food noise. Think about the word negotiation whenever you think about the interplay between you and any thoughts going on in your brain. We'll circle back to that. So I want to share where my motivation came from this once again. And that was basically that it's just I have kids, for all of you that are parents out there, there's few things that I would die for. My kids are one of them. So I care more about their future than mine. So it's been well documented now that out of all the world's wealthy nations, we're one of those. And I'm coming to you from America. I know that we have people from other countries here. But out of all the world's wealthy nations, the United States is by far the most unhealthy. And so we've got money, but we're the most unhealthy and suffering the most with chronic disease. So that's a kind of a paradox where we have the most resources and we have the worst health status in the entire world. And it's important to mention that our life expectancy, for the first time in a long time, this is where my motivation for this topic comes from. Our life expectancy for the first time in a long time is the lowest out of the worldly nations and steadily declining for the first time. Because of medical advancements and all these wonderful things going on in the world, we've actually been, projecting that we can live longer, but that's changing. It's going down. So what does that mean? Whatever we're doing is not working, right? So there's my motivation. And I will say that the American diet is the cause, and we're exporting this to other countries. And this is not to blame and shame America. I mean, don't hate the player, hate the game, right? If we stop eating junk food, those companies will make something healthier, so we have the way that we reclaim control of this and in essence affect the world is by changing, our situation, changing the demand. The supply always reacts to the demand. So get off of drugs, they won't make drugs. Get off of junk food, they won't make junk food. So we can do something, but we're exporting the American diet to other countries where we're now seeing these unsettling metrics increase as well. So here's my curiosity. Let's step into the maybe zone. It concerns one of the most important observations that we make in society and in ourselves as well, and it unveils the definition of insanity, in my opinion, that's feeding into the issues that I was just talking about. Why is it that we can make clear, grounded decisions in the morning, but change our mind? So here's what it would sound like. Today, maybe you did this morning. Today, I'm eating clean. Today, I'm staying aligned. Today, I'm going to follow through. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get my steps in. I've got my Aura ring on. And then somewhere between breakfast and lunch, it happens quick. Remember, most of our brain is happening below the level of consciousness, our subconsciousness. But somewhere between breakfast and lunch, a new voice enters the conversation. And it's not a loud voice and it's not aggressive. It's not even deemed as irrational. As a matter of fact, it sounds responsible and reasonable, this voice. This voice comes in and tells you something completely different, and it doesn't sound like a bad idea. You worked hard this week. This is what the voice says. You can start again tomorrow. I mean, come on, let's be reasonable. You don't live forever. This won't make a difference. I saw a commercial the other day that it was a joke, but they brought it up. If you went on a diet today, you're not going to lose like significant weight. Like you're not going to get accomplished a lot. You're not going to accomplish a lot in one day. So what they said is, so you might as well eat like cake and brownies and stuff like that, because the same goes for that. You're not going to destroy your whole life with one day. So we're always playing with that idea in our head, and it's programmed. It's wired in there. You worked hard, right? This is not going to make a difference. And just like that, the original decision that you woke up with extreme urgency and clarity, it just shifts. It just quietly gets overruled by these other ones. Now that's an interesting thing to consider. The overruling is, it's not something that is like some form of a rebellion, but it's a negotiation. There's that word again. And the negotiation is working. If if you look at like an FBI, negotiator trying to talk somebody out of like a crime or something like that, he's trying to use his words to shift the way that person is thinking. That's the way that the negotiation happens in our brain as well. And just knowing that, just being armed with that awareness is powerful. Because if I can look at the voice in my head telling me these things and call it a negotiation, it kind of separates me from it. The danger is when I identify with the voice, right? So when you make that decision in the morning that we were talking about, you control where you're planning, there's discipline there, future focused, all of that stuff. But as the day goes on, stress builds. This is what we're going to get into, a little bit of the research and the science here. As the day goes on, you forgot about this in the morning, that stress is going to begin to build, and energy can drop from the day. I feel really good right now, but I might have a drop in energy later. And something called decision fatigue kicks in. So, we're going to go into this a little bit, but decision fatigue, real simple, means that these decisions that we have to make of what we're supposed to do and what we shouldn't do, they start to become fatiguing. So that's an important distinction. Research by a guy named Roy Baumeister shows that as your mental energy declines, your ability to stay disciplined does too. So if I make a decision to do something today, I need to know that. I need to know that as I get tired, my decision making becomes weaker and my discipline goes down. And that there's no exception. You might have better discipline than other people, but that's just the way things work. So, this is one of the core reasons people ask this question: why does my willpower fail later in the day? I mean, as a health transformation coach, I've heard that thousands of times. I start off strong. So we're getting into the science of this to empower you guys. So at the same time, your brain is running what's called habit loops. There's a guy named Dr. Judson Brewer, and what he's shown is that cravings are not random. So here's an empowerment right now. Cravings are not random. They actually follow a loop. There's something called a cue, a craving response, and then a reward. And once that loop is trained and conditioned, we always talk about the conditioned mind, program and conditioned mind. Once that loop, that something cues you in, and then we respond to it, but it's typically like a reaction because we don't think. That's why the interface response system is so important. So we pause and we think. But then there's a reward. And we typically are supposed to fire a gun by saying ready, aim, fire. But this is fire, aim, ready. And it feels automatic, like it's happening to you. And we typically don't recognize that we've done something wrong until after, which is why we think it's happening to us. But we can control this. And here's why this gets even more disruptive to the story that we tell ourselves. From a neuroscience perspective, now really try to pay attention to this. This is powerful. From a neuroscience perspective, most of our decisions, especially those with eating, are not fully consciousness. So let's park there for a second. What that means is that when you have this idea to eat something, it's not a fully conscious idea, meaning you were not involved in it like you think you were. Now, you might have these thoughts and feelings about it that kind of justify, and you might get this feeling like, I have an idea. What I'm showing you is that the research shows that it wasn't your idea. So there's another cool way of separating and asking a question like, oh, is that right, JC or Dragon? We were playing the other week about giving that voice a name and separating yourself. So research suggests that 80 to 95% of behaviors are driven subconsciously. This is why we can sleepwalk. We can go down to the kitchen and make a dinner without being there. Okay. So 80 to 95% of behaviors are happening subconsciously. And in a landmark experiment, there's a guy named Benjamin Libet who showed, see, this is what I love. I love finding out about this stuff and making sense of it. And what Libet showed was that your brain initiates decisions before you even are aware of making them. That means that the craving, that urge, and even the justification, when you swoop in and explain to yourself, right, why it's okay, may already have happened before that you feel in your prefrontal cortex that you chose anything. So what that means is the decision was made before you had any say in it, but it doesn't appear that way. So today, I want you to play with this, or I encourage you to play with this. When you have that craving to do something and you have the ability to initiate a pause and just say, well, hold on a second. And just think about it. If you can grab onto that information and say, is this really what I think is a good idea? Or is this that negotiation we were talking about? So I'll put a lot of the links in the studies in the when you get the podcast episode or on the YouTube channel, so you guys can look at that and read about it. But that's the essence of what it is that you need to know. Now, if you listen to this conversation and just say, "I don't give a shit," as long as you know, because then you can stop being a victim of it as if it's something happening to you. You have a big, big say in this, and if you do this long enough, you'll to all of this. This isn't just about psychology, it's also about physiology. Now, I'm going to get into a topic here that everybody is aware of, and that's this whole concept of the GLP-1s. A lot of people don't even know what GLP-1s are. A lot of people think that they're just like meds, but GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptides. It's a peptide. So it's not something like we have GLP-1s naturally released in our body. So GLP-1s are released in your gut. And if you can grasp this, this might be very helpful if you're considering taking like a GLP-1 drug, because there's side effects of that too. But you'll also understand why they work so well. So GLP-1s are released naturally in your gut when you eat, specifically certain foods. And I'll try to share some of those. And those are like protein, fats, and fiber. Fiber is a big one that stimulates the release naturally of GLP-1s. And what GLP-1s do when they're released in your body, not just from a pill, is they slow digestion, they stabilize food sugar, or they stabilize blood sugar, and they tell your body you're good. You've had enough. So you become satiated. So that's what GLP-1s are there for. And what I just showed you is that there's certain types of food and there's also certain types of activity that naturally release GLP-1s. A lot of them, okay? And here's the catch though. The signal doesn't last long. So when somebody's experiencing food noise, that's because there is not a sufficient amount of GLP-1s being released. Make sense? So if you feel full and then all of a sudden you feel like you want to eat again, that's because it wasn't long lasting. And the reason why, here's another cool thing to understand, is your body produces an enzyme called DPP4. And what DPP4, and this is naturally produced in your body, that rapidly breaks down GLP-1s within minutes. So the "I'm full" signal fades quickly, and then the hunger begins to return, so that you're actually experiencing this throughout the entire day. And it's a biological cycle: GLP-1 turning hunger off, DPP4, turning it back on. And when that happens, guess what shows up? Guess what shows up when the DPP4 turns the hunger back on? The food noise. So now you're in a different position right now. Now you can say, okay, so if I'm having food noise right now, if you wanted to geek out a little bit, you know that your GLP-1 is down and your DPP4 has come in. Now, there's ways of leveraging this situation, because if I can do things to inhibit my DPP4, and enhance my GLP-1, which is why people are taking the drugs, okay? And like I said, there's a downside to it, but that's what's going on, right? But there's natural ways to do it. So this is why GLP-1 meds have become so effective for weight loss, which is not what they were supposed to be for. They're for type 2 diabetics. And they're also very good at stopping the food noise. So the pill, the drug, the shot doesn't actually make you lose weight. What makes you lose weight is you stop eating. And the way you stop eating is you're enhancing the GLP-1 in your gut, okay? And if you're taking this pill, it's basically winning the war against the DPP4. But like I said, it comes at a cost. So what happens here, stopping the food noise is what happens, but they either mimic GLP-1 or protect it from being broken down, which keeps the "I'm full" signal there much longer. Now, I don't know if anybody ever heard of this before, but I would assume that the average American, whether they admit it or not, think that GLP-1s are drugs. And what I'm showing you is that they are chemicals, but they're already in your body and they're there naturally. And if you could learn how to eat the right foods and stimulate GLP-1s and inhibit the enzyme that breaks them down and makes you hungry again, your whole life will change and you don't have to worry about the side effects. So I wanted to empower you with that because that makes the cravings go quiet, that whole process. So it doesn't go quiet because somebody suddenly became more disciplined, by the way. It goes quiet, the noise goes quiet, the cravings go quiet because biology changed. Remember, I said this is not just about psychology, this is about biology. And biology we can control a lot more than psychology. And here's where you take your power back. Because while most people think that the only solution is the med, and it's a hard, it's a hard argument to win because they do work so masterfully, and now you know why. Um, but a lot of people think that's the only solution, and it's not entirely true. So I'm going to introduce you to somebody, and I'm going to put this. I'm going to tell you where you can find if this is interesting to you and you really want to lock into this, we have a lot of coaches and experts in the field that listen to the show, or you just might be somebody that is like, hey, this makes sense and I want to learn more about it. MEANS. She comes out of, I think she did her studies and her work in, she's an MD. Was an ear, nose, and throat, but now her expertise is in metabolic health. Dr. Casey Means points out that you can naturally support this system that I just talked about through how you eat and how you live. So I'm going to give you some of that. So she gave a great analogy. And I love this, especially if you're a health professional or you're just a product of it. You're going to love this. So she gave this great analogy, and I want to share it with you. She was explaining how the downfall of healthcare, pay attention to this, because you guys all have specialists in your life. The downfall to healthcare, which is causing all of that sickness and disease we were talking about, is connected to the growing field of specialization. Now, wake up to this. We have a lot of health professionals that are specializing in the treatment of specific things. And what it means is health professionals are focusing their careers on a specialized level, treating specific aspects of downstream symptoms from the primary cause. And what we know now is that all of these things are connected in some way to metabolic dysfunction, metabolic disease. And what that means is that your body is engineered to take food and convert it into fuel to use for energy. Food was not made to make us happy and have fun. That's not what it's for. So you can see that we've kind of turned it into that insane shift. So she says that the healthcare system right now is very analogous to playing whack-a-mole. Do you guys remember playing whack-a-mole in carnivals and things like that? So they're just playing whack-a-mole and just trying to specialize in getting rid of the moles or the different symptoms downstream, but it's all coming from the same place. So specialization is one of the primary reasons that we see an increase in disease because nobody's looking at the upstream cause. So it also gave some great strategies, like the GLP-1 craze to attack. That's a specialization. They're not treating health, they're treating obesity and food noise with the GLP-1s. But there's also strategies to do that the natural way. And we can do that rather than succumbing to what is, proving to be one of the biggest cash cows that Big Pharma has. Do you know that Big Pharma is poised to make about $1 trillion during one of the worst economies ever, by the way? Trillions of dollars from just GLP-1s, specifically like Ozempic. So pay attention to those things because we kind of shut those things out when we're feeling like we're getting good results. Okay. So Dr. Casey Means shares that stuff, but she also further explains how whole, unprocessed foods, especially things that are rich in protein, healthy fats, and like I said before, fiber, naturally stimulate GLP-1s. She makes a very strong point that a high fiber diet and a high protein diet, especially with exercise, by the way, stimulates on a regular basis GLP-1s. And another thing is if you are somebody like myself, I go to the gym almost every day. But then I find myself sedentary for the remainder of the day. So she's a big advocate of doing things throughout the day, moving your body, getting your fiber, and things like that. Movement is super important, movement in itself. And we've had Dr. Wendy Suzuki on here that talks a lot about brain health, but movement improves insulin sensitivity and hormonal signaling. So there's certain plant compounds out there that have an effect on inhibiting DPP-4, by the way. So remember, DPP-4 comes in and gets rid of the GLP-1, which is taking away your hunger and bringing the hunger back. So if we get into a healthy nutrition program, we'll be less hungry. I'm somebody that I've done a 7-day water fast, and whether you're a fan of that or not, it's pretty interesting how I'm not hungry, you know? So hunger is a really, really interesting thing, and we're talking about food noise. So when you think that, you know, or when you think about how to stop cravings, which is what we're talking about here, or how to make healthy choices easier, you're not just managing your thoughts, you're managing these physical signals as well. So that's what is actually happening, right? You're not weak, you're not broken, you're not lacking discipline. A lot of people fall below the line of responsibility because they think that they're the problem. You're experiencing a real-time negotiation between your brain and your body and the environment. It's a negotiation, which you now can see. One part of you is focused on your future, and the other is focused on the immediate relief. That's the negotiation. You start off in the morning about a plan of action that's focused on your future, and then the other part of the negotiation comes in and a debate starts about immediate relief. And right now. So what does that mean? Is the immediate relief voice is louder. Okay? It's because your belief system is probably a little bit decreased about the long-term one. So the real problem isn't the craving, it's how fast you agree with it. Let me say that again. The real problem here is not the craving, it's how fast you agree with the craving. So that's the moment where most people lose control, and that's exactly where you can take it back, right in that moment. So let's talk about that 4-step system called the interface response system, but break it down accordingly for this. If you're wondering how to stop food noise and how to stay disciplined, the answer isn't trying harder, it's interrupting the pattern. So that's what we're about to do, interrupt the pattern. But I've just armed you with the weapon of awareness. You're aware now about all this stuff. Remember what I said in the beginning. If you just recognize that the voice, the food noise, is a negotiation, you're already in position to win because it's debatable now. If you realize that you don't have a say, remember 80 to 95% of our behaviors happen without asking us. If you recognize that, it validates you looking under the hood. So the interface response system comes in here. So step 1 of the interface response system, whether it's a behavioral shift you're looking for or to reclaim control over food noise, step 1 is called perceive. We notice the voice, the food noise, and we notice it not as the truth, but we notice it as input and a suggestion. So what does that mean? I notice the food noise, and rather than saying, that is me, I'm going to react, I say, noted, thank you for the suggestion. Put it in the suggestion box. We'll go over all of them later. So that's the first step. Just becoming aware that it's not an order, it's a suggestion. And it's not the truth, it's just a maybe. So this validates, all this stuff validates step 2, which is pause, the power of the pause. So we always say, Because once you recognize something, you can go, "Huh," and you can say, "That's interesting, and I'm gonna hold off on that for a second." And we're gonna create space, and this is where the power lives, by the way. If you can distance yourself even just a little bit for a little bit of time from your reaction, your knee-jerk reaction, you're gonna win. This is where the power lives. So pausing isn't saying that it's not saying like, "Hey, this is never gonna happen." That's not what pausing is. So a lot of people say, "But I want it, but I want it." So you can still have it, but pause. Take your time and think about it first. The difference between a reaction and a response is thinking. There's no thinking, and remember, the thinking's being done before you even have the reaction, okay? So it's not the truth, right? Like, that's what we said before. So what we're doing is we're just gonna hold on for a seckie. Hold on for a second, and we're gonna think about it. Now, if you can learn, this is called cognitive distancing. If you can learn to create space and just think about things a little bit and contemplate them, we're going to move into the next stage where we actually ask questions about it. You're going to win. You're going to win. So, little disclaimer, you got to want to win first. If you're in a place where you're just succumbing to all this stuff, which is just an excuse to be able to do whatever the hell you want, by the way, but if you really want to reclaim control and be the shot caller of your days, you can do it. So step one, perceive. Step two, pause. Now that we're in this space and we've got a little bit of breathing room, we can take a look around. We can look under the hood. So step three is called process. This is the interface response system that is taught in extent in this book. Makes sense. And then we're going to go over that on Thursday night in the mastermind. So step three is called process. And process is where we become open and curious. So powerful for a human being to become open rather than closed and curious rather than certain. I can't tell you how powerful uncertainty is in this world. Because as soon as you're certain, you are closed to growth, if you think about it, which there's some things you can be certain of. Remember, I'm not trying to teach people what to do. I'm just pointing out options. So we become open and curious, and we ask questions like, is this hunger? Is this really hunger? Or is this distraction? Or maybe even relief? Is this aligned with me and what I truly want? Or is this just a well argued situation? I love looking at it like that. Is this aligned with me and everything that I know I truly want and what matters most? Or is this just a well argued interrogation, right? Or the suggestion. Say, hey, sometimes I like to say to the food noise or to my mind, say, well argued, right? But I have a say. So we move from step three and we move to step four, which is proceed, where we actually make a decision. And we can choose consciously now. We're back online and choose consciously. Food noise never really goes away, but it just becomes less agreeable because we realize that it's just a suggestion. It's not the truth. So we consciously and intentionally make a decision, which is called a response. Remember, the main difference between a reaction and a response is your thought process. One uses it and the other does not. So this is basically it. This is how we build better habits in our life. Because if we do this over time, a lot of these things. So food noise is always there, but it just becomes a little bit less noisy. It's kind of like having a friend that is just always just saying stupid shit and it never really has any, credibility, and you just stop listening to that person. Or the boy who cried wolf, right? If somebody keeps on complaining and saying they need help and they don't, they're just looking for attention, you're going to stop listening to them. You can do that with your food noise. Okay. So this is how you build better habits over time. This is how you stop self-sabotage. Remember, when you're involved in self-sabotage, you're involved in it. That's what's funny about self-sabotage is the illusion is that something's happening to you. No, you're happening to you. So you have to reclaim control of you. So this is how we stop self-sabotage and how we become the one that's making decisions again. So the question is, what if the food noise that everybody is just raving about and $1 trillion industry has been created because of it, taking advantage, the demand, I can't do this on my own. And by the way, if you watch the commercials, that's where you've learned that you can't do it on your own. Of course you can. Anybody can. Might be harder for some, but of course you can. So what if food noise is not the enemy? What if it's just feedback? What if it's just part of your perception? And it's feedback from a system doing exactly what it was designed to do. That system that is creating these problems was designed to protect you and reward you and keep you efficient. But we are just subjected to so much shit right now, but not always there to help you become who you truly want to be. So, have you decided who you truly want to be? And are you able to then look at what you're doing today and the decisions and ask? Remember, perceive, pause, and process and ask, is this in alignment with what I truly want? My North Star. So maybe the goal today isn't to eliminate the voice. Maybe it's to recognize it and then identify that you're not the voice, right? You're actually just the one that hears the voice. You're not the voice. And once you see that, you stop being controlled by it. So the next time the voice shows up, this might be a little bit of a fun game to play. The next time that voice shows up, the one that sounds reasonable, the one that makes a strong case, right, in a court of law, what if you didn't fight it? What if you didn't look at it as a problem and fight it? And what if you just simply asked, is this aligned or is this just well argued? Well argued case, Mr. Food Noise. And that makes sense. So I hope this is fun for you guys. I mean, I know that a lot of people are struggling. I see Aaron says certainty feeds impulses, causing reactions to occur. Certainty feeds impulses, causing reactions. I love that. So true. You know, I had a mentor, Aaron, one day that said, what did anybody ever get for being right? I like to be uncertain about things. I like to be certain about being uncertain about things because as she just said, certainty causes reactions to occur. And pausing and praying, another form of praying, will stop one from being preyed upon. That's beautiful. Praying stops being prayed, and make the path clear to respond. Beautiful. I think that's something that we have to put into the show. Yes, so good. I love this. Let's see. Anybody else have any questions or let's see who's got makes sense. Great topic. Anybody have a question or a distinction to make before we say a goodbye? So remember, this is an episode that's going to drop on Friday. Tomorrow we have a new episode. So it's going to get all cleaned up and shortened. And love feedback. If you guys have my book, remember Thursday night, the 16th, is when we're going to have our next mastermind on the book. You guys are all welcome. Even if you haven't gotten the book, of course, you're welcome. But just reach out. If you've got the book, you should have gotten an email telling you how to log into that. And that's it. So anybody have any distinctions or questions or insights or anything or disputes for this conversation? It's been great to see all of you here. I got a lot of you guys join the Substack today. And remember, all of these are on our YouTube channel. All of our interviews. We just launched our best of March, which is really cool. We just highlighted everything. God, we have so many amazing guests coming on this show now, and I'm just so excited about that. Any questions or anything like that? I don't know if there's a delay of sorts, but I'm just going to assume that you guys got your fill today, or you're kind of listening to this while you're on your way somewhere else. So just remember, and this is about you, if you learned something That's how it's gonna stay. What that's saying is that if you're looking to have a nice day today, the highest form of self-actualization is when you hear something, you make a distinction, maybe you made a note and you go pay it forward and share it with somebody else, that's when you grasp it. That actually comes from Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's why the whole program and that support system, the 12-step program, a lot of it has to do with becoming a support structure for somebody else. So if you learned something today, give it away, put it into play by giving it away, and that's how it's going to stay. So whenever you listen to a podcast or you watch one of my lives, I'm getting the most out of it because I'm teaching it. And remember, to teach is to learn twice. So go out there and take these things, make sense of them, and share them in your own words. Maybe write about it, do a blog on Substack about what you learned today, and you'll notice that it'll become solidified in your own wiring. So love and appreciate you all. Have an amazing day, and we'll see you next time.